Hiya! In this lesson, we're going to go over some basics for Adobe Illustrator. We'll start off with a small introduction to the program and to raster versus vector images. Then we will do a practice project together that will acclimate you to some of the tools and functions within the program. So Illustrator is a vector-based program. What that means is instead of using pixels to make graphics like raster images, it uses points and calculates the slopes between those points to make lines and curves. In raster images, the file uses a pixel array and remembers which pixels in the grid are assigned what color. Normally, if you have a high resolution, you're not likely to notice these pixels. If you need to resize your piece though, you can have an issue with pixelation. A raster image only has a set number of pixels. So if you double the size of an image that has 10 pixels for every inch, it's going to keep those 10 pixels. The problem is instead of 10 pixels every 1 inch, it's now 10 pixels every 2 inches. This means the pixels need to be bigger to cover the space, and this is what causes the pixelation. In a vector image, it remembers the positions of a series of points, also known as anchor points, and the slopes at those points, so the computer can then calculate the curve of the lines between those points. So if the dimensions need to change, rather than trying to spread a set number of pixels over the new distance, the computer just calculates the new curves according to the new dimensions. This allows you to make graphics that you can either resize super big or super small without having to worry about pixelation. A lot of logos are made as vector graphics, so that way the logo can be displayed on something as small as a business card or as large as the side of a bus. Another bonus to using Illustrator is it is more object-based than what Photoshop is. In Photoshop, once you lay down a stroke, it's hard to reshape it. In Illustrator, once you lay down a stroke or create a shape, you can go back and edit it no matter how far into your project you are. You can change the shape of a curve, add more anchor points on a line, quickly add a stroke, change the colors, etc. To help you get used to working within Illustrator, let's do an assignment where we create a simple snowman together. And now we're going to move on to the practice project. If you have the welcome screen up, there's going to be a little create new button. You can just hit that, or you can go to file and new, and it'll bring up this new document dialog box. So I just need a document that's 8.5 by 11. I have it set to inches, but you can change the measurement to whatever you are more comfortable with. Make sure there's only one artboard, no bleeds, and then under advanced options, we want to set the color mode to Cmyk. Usually this mode is going to be dependent on whether you plan on printing something out or if it's going to live entirely on a screen. If it's going to never leave a computer screen, then usually you want to set your color profile to RGB. But since there might be a chance that we'll print this out, we're going to leave it at Cmyk. Make sure your raster effects are set to 300 ppi, and then just hit create. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the first circle for our snowman here. So I'm going to go off to my toolbar here, and I'm going to look for my rectangle tool, and I'm going to right click, and it's going to bring me all these other different kinds of shape tools. If you'll look, there's a little tiny triangle next to some of these tools. What that means is there are more tools nested with that one, so if you right click on them, you'll see there are more options for you to pick from. So I'm just going to find my rectangle tool and then select my ellipse tool, and we're going to make the first snowball for our snowman. Now, in order to keep it in a perfect circle, I'm going to hold Shift and I'll create my first snowball. If you want to create your shape from the center out, you just hold either Alt or Option depending on your keyboard. And then I hold Shift as well, and it'll make a perfect circle coming out from that center. If I want more of an oval shape, but I still want it to come out from the center, I just hold Alt or Option, and you'll see it'll come out from that center rather than from a corner. So make sure you have a nice big snowball, And I want it to be filled with white and a black outline. If yours doesn't have that coloring, you can just go up to this bar up here. If you don't see this bar, just go to this little window here. It's to the left of the light bulb. Or you can go to Window and Workspace and just make sure your workspace is set to Essentials Classic. Make sure it's Essentials Classic and not just Essentials. And then that should give you this bar up here to work with. So this first drop down is going to control the fill. The fill is the inner part of your shape here. So just go to this menu here and you can pick the swatches. Since it's a snowman, I'm just going to pick white for the fill. And then the second square here, the one with the hole in the middle, that controls your stroke. Remember, the stroke is the outline of a shape, or it's just the line. So with the shape selected, I'm just going to make sure that's set to black for right now. And then I'm just going to put my first circle kind of low on my canvas here. And then in order to make the next circle, I can either just go back to my ellipse tool and make another one, or I can grab my selection tool and I can hold either Alt or Option on your keyboard, and when I click on the shape and drag, you'll see that it creates another circle the same size as the one we just made. So I'm just going to put this back in the center and I'm going to overlap the two circles a bit. And then I'm going to resize it using my selection tool. Remember, the selection tool is that black arrow that helps you move entire shapes and objects and groups. So I'm just going to hold Alt or Option and Shift, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller since this is going to be our torso circle. And I'm going to make it about that size. And then if I want to make the third circle, I can do that Alt again, or I can go over to my shaper tool. The shortcut for that is Shift N. It looks like a circle with a pencil next to it. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to quickly make shapes without having to be too exact about it. So like if I want to make a triangle, it does that. Square. Just make normal polygons. So the shaper tool is a quick way to make a nice uniform shape really fast. But you can see that when it makes it, it gives it a gray fill and a black outline. And we want it to match the two snowballs we have down here. So what I'm going to do is with this circle selected, I'm going to select my eyedropper by just hitting I on my keyboard. And then I'm just going to click on one of these snowballs. And as long as I have the head selected, it should change the fill and stroke to match whichever one I click on. So I have these snowballs stacked the way I want them to. But if you went to do it and your snowballs are a little bit off, what you can do is you can select all of them and find your align panel. If you can't see it off to your right, you can always go to Window and Align, and it will bring up the panel for you. And if yours looks a little bit more like this, you can go to those three lines there and hit Show Options, and that will give you your Align To option, and just make sure that's set to selection. You can also align it to your artboard, which is our canvas here, or you can pick a particular object that you want everything aligned to, and that will be denoted by the object with the thick blue line around it. So if I wanted that one or that one, it would align to whichever object I click on. But I'm just going to do Align to Selection, and then I'm going to hit Align the horizontal center, and you can see it brings everything so that way their centers are all matched up. But you'll also notice that sometimes when I move things, these pink purple lines show up. Those are your smart guides. Those are another way to help you get things aligned with other objects. So now that I have basically the body of the snowman set up, I'm going to go ahead and start on creating the eyes. Now the nice thing about Illustrator is you are not confined to your canvas or your artboard. You can actually assemble things off in the pasteboard, which is this gray area over here, and you can do all of your fiddly stuff that you need to off to the side and then just drag it over to the main piece and fit it where you need it to go. So I'm going to build my eye over here, and I'm just going to make a circle. And you can make whatever type of eye you want. You can either follow along with me or you can experiment on your own to create your own design. And remember, your selection tool lets you grab entire objects, and your direct selection tool, which is that white arrow, lets you grab anchor points, which allows you to kind of modify the shape, and you can grab handles and things like that. Another tool that's going to be handy is your pen tool. So it's this tool right here. The shortcut for that is usually P. And this allows you to create shapes off the bat, but what you can do is if you go to the edge, you'll see a little symbol appear. That's your add anchor point tool. And that allows you to add some extra anchor points to a shape so you can get a bit more refined with how a line curves or how a shape is created. And then if you hover over an anchor point, you'll see that plus sign turns to a minus sign, and when you click on an anchor point, it'll disappear. So I'm going to get rid of that anchor point. I'm going to use my direct selection tool to modify the curve. So this comes down to a hard line at the bottom. I'm just moving my handles down to the anchor point. Once you get close enough, it kind of converts the anchor point into a hard corner rather than a curve. Now in these swatches, you'll notice in both sets there is this option that's a white square with a red line through it. What that allows you to do is you can create a shape, and if you don't want an outline, you just want the fill, you can just select that first one and set it to none, and it'll just give you the shape with the fill in it. Or if you just want an outline and you don't want to fill, you can set that to none, and I'll just give you the line. So that way you can do something kind of like that. So that's what I did on my pupil here. I set the stroke to none, and then I have black on the fill turned on, so that way I don't have a stroke making my circle a little bit bigger. Okay, now you can see that my iris here kind of goes further than what my eyeball has space for. So rather than using the pen tool and my direct selection tool to try and match that edge up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my eyeball, and I'm going to select that duplicate and the iris, and then I'm going to find my Pathfinder panel. If you can't find it off to your right, just go to Window and Pathfinder, and it'll bring up the panel for you. Now you've got a lot of options in here that you can pick from. What I want is I want it to keep the part of the blue that is overlapping with the part of the white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the intersect option, which is the third one. And you can see it reshapes the green circle, so that way the edge matches the edge on the eyeball. And then if you just want a line, you can use the pen tool, but you can also use either your arc tool or your line segment tool if you just want a plain line, and then you can just modify it with your direct selection tool. And you can see that when I create a line that's not an enclosed shape, the end kind of has this flat, blunt edge. I don't really like that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the line, and then I'm going to go up to where it says stroke and actually click on the word. And it gives me this option, and I can change all these different things about it. Like I can change the cap to this rounded end, so that way it's not as abrupt. Or if you have something with sharp corners like this, you can change how those corners look. So if you want more of a rounded corner, you can select that. Or you can kind of do like the shaved off corner. And then you also have the option to create a dashed line. You can change how far apart they are, how they go around corners. And you can even set up arrowheads. Depending on what end you want the arrow at. But I just want a simple rounded ended line. And then I don't like how it's overlapping with my eyeball here, so I'm going to send it backwards. So that way the eyeball is going to be on top of the eyelash there, and it's not going to create that overlap look. In order to send something backward, you either hit Control or Command and then hit left bracket. And then sometimes you might just need to hold that bracket down until the object goes far enough back that it goes behind whatever object you want to hide it behind. If you want to bring something forward, it's just Control or Command right bracket, and you just hit it until it brings it forward as much as you need it to. Okay, now that I'm happy with it, rather than just selecting everything and then dragging it over, I'm going to create a group. The advantage of a group is you can see if you have something like this that has a lot of itty bitty pieces, every time you go to move the eyeball, you have to make sure you have everything selected, which is fine right now because I don't have anything else on my paste board. But if I were to move it over onto my face here, every time I try to select the whole eye, I have to make sure that I don't get the head as well. So by grouping something, it links them all together, so no matter what object you click on, it'll select the entire group. The way you group something is you select everything you want in the group, and you can either hit Control or Command G, or you can right click and just go to Group. And if you want to ungroup something again, you just right click, hit ungroup. But now that I have it grouped, I'm just going to move it over here. And I'm just going to place it on my snowman here. And rather than creating a new eye, I'm just going to hold Alt and drag it over. And then I want to move these eyelashes over to the other side, but I want to keep my reflections all going in the same direction. So I'm just going to double click on this, And it'll bring up this isolation menu, and you can see this gray bar appears at the top here, and it says Layer 1 Group. And that allows me to edit this group and change things. But they'll stay grouped. I don't have to do the ungroup, regroup thing. So I want to reflect these eyelashes, so I'm just going to right click and go to Transform and Reflect. And if you have Preview checked marked, you can actually see what these different effects will do to your object. So I'm just going to do that and then drag them over to the side. And then I just hit that arrow until the gray bar disappears. And this is still one big group. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a hat for my snowman here. And I want to use my Blob Brush to do that. So if you go to your toolbar over here and find your paintbrush tool, and then right click and hit Blob Brush, that will give you a tool that lets you make shapes the way you want. And then you can go in and modify them with your pen tool or your direct selection tool. Now it's important to make sure that you select your Blob Brush to color things in rather than your paintbrush tool. The difference between these tools is your paintbrush creates line segments, whereas your Blob Brush creates shapes. So if you look at these two shapes, I made this with the paintbrush and I made this with the Blob Brush. Just looking at them, they look very similar. But if I hover over the thing that I made with the paintbrush, you'll see all these blue lines in the middle. What's happened is I've basically just created one big line segment that's overlapping itself. And I've created all these unnecessary anchor points that I just don't need. So that's why you don't ever want to color something in with your paintbrush tool. That's going to add a lot more anchor points than you need. It's going to make things messy. You can't modify the shape as easily. And it's going to inflate the file size of your document. Whereas with the object that I made with the Blob Brush, the anchor points are just restrained to the edge of the object here. And it's a little easier to modify the shape. Another nice thing about the Blob Brush tool is if I double click on it, it brings up this option menu, and I can change the size of it in here. But also, if I go to size and go to this drop down, if you have a pressure sensitive tablet turned on, or if you have a pressure sensitive device, you can change this from fixed to pressure, and it will use your pen pressure to create the shapes. So let me bring this up. And you can see that if I press lightly on my tablet, it makes a small line. And if I press harder, it fattens the shape up. So that's why I like using the Blob Brush. It feels more like a traditional paintbrush that you'd use in something like, say, Photoshop. The only annoying thing is if you make your size bigger, the variation doesn't match it. So every time you change the size of your brush, you have to make sure it changes the variation as well. So I'm just going to make a smallish brush. And then I'm going to make a hat for my snow person here. So I think I'm going to make a kind of knit style hat. So I'm just going to draw the rim first, or the folded over part. And rather than going in and trying to color this in, I'm just going to, with the object selected, right click, release compound path, and it fills it in. The thing is, when it does that, it creates the inner shape that got filled in as well. So you can either just select it and hit delete, or something I do is I just always have my Pathfinder panel open, and I just hit unite, and it just flattens that out. And it just flattens that out really quick. So I'm just going to change the shape of this. In order to do the release compound path, you have to make sure that the shape is enclosed. If the shape's not enclosed, it's not going to give you that option. So if for some reason you can't select release compound path, just go to all your corners and just make sure that everything is closed up like it's supposed to be. So I'm just using my anchor points and handles to kind of change the shape of this a bit more. Okay, and before I do the cap part, I'm just going to change the color of it because I want to keep the two pieces separate so that way I can color them a bit differently. Because if I were to continue using black, you'll see that it just combines the two shapes together. So I'm just going to pick a slightly different color. And then I'm going to make the cap. Make sure I have an enclosed space. Right click, release compound, and then just merge them together. Okay, so I want to add kind of a stripe pattern to this hat here. So I am going to find my knife tool. If you find your eraser tool, you can usually find the knife tool in there. If you cannot find your knife tool at all, again, make sure that your workspace is set to Essentials Classic. So I want to make sure that I have this shape selected, and then I'm going to grab my knife tool. And I'm going to cut this up into slices. So that way, it'll give me blocks that I can color to make it look like the hat has a striped pattern. When you're going to do this, make sure you're not trying to get on the very edge here to cut through your object, because sometimes you won't always meet that edge. As long as you have the shape selected, it will only cut through the selected shape. If you don't have the shape selected and you go to use your knife tool, it is going to cut through every single object that you can see. So make sure if you only want to affect one object, you have that object selected when you do your cutting. So now that I have all these separate pieces set up, I'm going to go ahead and pick my colors for my stripes. And if you're looking in the swatches and you don't like anything that's in here, you can create your own custom colors by going to the color panel. Again, if you don't see it, just go to Window and Color. And then it should give you some sliders. If you don't see the sliders and you just see this big color bar, just go to this option menu over here and just go to these three lines over here and hit Show Options, and it'll give you sliders to work with. And you can also go there to change the color mode as well. So you just change the sliders to pick whatever color you want, or if you double click on the square, it'll give you a color picker similar to the one that's in Photoshop. And if you want to select more than one shape at a time, if you hold Shift and click, that lets you select multiple objects at one time. And I'm just using my eyedropper to match the colors here. And now I'm going to cut up my hat to match. Again, I'm going to make sure I have the object selected. I'm going to grab my knife tool And then I'm just going to cut this up as needed. And when I'm cutting this up, I'm kind of taking into account the folds I have in my shape here. So that's why I'm doing the outside ones first. And again, just make sure you're cutting through the entire shape. I just realized that I was clicking here and going up when actually my shape is down here. Again, I'm just holding shift to select multiple objects. Now to make sure that all of the objects are kind of grouped correctly, you can see after you cut something, it just puts them into separate objects. So I'm just going to select the rim here and group it, and then I'm going to select the cap here and group it. And then I also want to add a shadow kind of along the edge here, so that way it kind of differentiates the two sections. So I'm just going to select this group here and duplicate it. And then I'm just going to change them all to black, unite it into one shape. And then I'm going to use my eraser tool. It's in the same spot as the knife tool. And I'm just going to cut off the top bit. I don't need the shadow to extend all the way up. I just need it a little bit above the rim here. And I'm going to use my direct selection tool and my pen tool to kind of just modify this a bit. Don't want the shadow too big. I'm going a little bit higher than what I need it to be because I am going to add a feather to this, which will kind of take out some of the usable space. So now that I have my shadow here, I'm just going to select it, and I'm going to hit Effect and Stylize, and I'm going to hit Feather. And as long as I have that preview turned on, I can see what the effect is doing. I'm just going to hit OK, and then I'm just going to use my tool to modify it a bit more. And then if you don't like how that black is blending in with the color of your hat, you can go to your transparency panel. Again, just window transparency if you can't find it. And this will have your blending modes. If you are familiar with Photoshop, these modes kind of help control how colors interact with each other. So I think multiply looks a little bit better. And I'm just going to lower it. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and give her a carrot nose. I'm going to grab my blob brush again. I'm just going to make a carrot shape. And sometimes when you add effects to something, it usually remembers those when you create a new shape. So I'm just going to go back to my appearance panel. Again, window, appearance, if you can't find the panel. And where it says feather, I'm just going to select that and hit that trash can at the bottom of the panel there. So that way it gets rid of that feather effect. And I'm just going to fill it in. And fix the shape. Okay, so I'm going to pick a more carroty color for it. And for this next part, make sure you add a stroke to it, because we're going to add some cuts into it to help give it some ridges here. So make sure you pick a color for your stroke and that it's not set to none. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Again, make sure you have a stroke applied to it. I'm going to grab my knife tool and I'm going to cut into it, except this time I'm not going to cut all the way through it. I'm just going to cut a little bit into it to make some ridges along my carrot here. If you're not seeing anything happen, just make sure you go up to your stroke and make sure there's a color assigned to it. You can also go into your color panel and just make sure you have that square with a hole in it selected, and that will change the color of your stroke. So I'm just going in and adding these ridges. If at some point you cut all the way through the carrot when you're adding that ridge, that's fine. Just make sure later on you group the objects so that way when you click on it you don't have to make sure you get both parts. And I want to give it rounded ends, so I'm just going to go to my stroke, and even though these look like lines, if I were to actually take this apart, it's really just a corner that's overlapping on itself. So when I go to the stroke panel, I have to go to corner rather than cap. And I'm going to select that round joint so that way these turn into round caps. Once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to move over and place it on my snowman here. And if you want to kind of get a 3/4 effect, you can just distort your eyes a little and kind of push them off to the side, and that will give you like a 3/4 look. You can see that I've got that black line going through it. I know the carrot is in front of the snowball, so I'm going to my transparency panel to check the settings. I can see it's set to multiply, so I'm just going to change that to normal, so that way I don't see that black line showing through. I think I'm going to bring in that eye a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and use my Blob Brush to make her some little coal buttons. Because this is a snowball and I'm putting the coals off to the edge here, we would technically see the curve of the snowball, so that's why I'm kind of putting these coal bits a little bit off center from each other, so that way it looks like it's following the edge of the snowman. And then I'm going to give her a scarf to kind of wrap around her head. So I'm going to go back over here and find my rectangle tool. And I'm going to select my rounded rectangle tool. What that does is it'll give me a rectangle with rounded corners on it. In some of the newer updates of Illustrator, you can go and make a normal rectangle. And then you'll notice these dots that are kind of inset a little into your shape. And those control the corners. So that's another way to make a rounded rectangle. I'm just going to use the tool because I don't need anything too fancy. And I'm just going to modify the shape a bit. I'm going to make sure it fits on her. And I can use my direct selection tool to kind of distort the shape a little if I want. I'm just going to bring it back over, and then I'm going to grab my knife tool again, and I'm going to do that slicing we did to create that stripe pattern. Remember, make sure that you're starting on the outside of your object and ending outside of it on the other side, so that way you make sure you get a nice clean cut. I think I might reverse these. And I'm going to group it so that way all of those objects are tied to each other. And then I'm going to make a bit that hangs down. So I'm just going to create a normal rectangle. And I'm just going to resize it to fit a little better. And again, because there is a curve to the snowball, I'm going to add an effect to it. I'm just going to go up here, hit Effect, Warp, and I'm going to hit Arc. See how that looks? I think I'm going to go with Arch instead, and I'm just going to select Vertical rather than Horizontal. And I'm just going to change the bend so that way it's not quite so extreme. Then I'm just going to hit OK. And it's still a good shape. So I want to be able to cut into it so I can make that striped pattern again, but if I just grab my knife tool and start doing it, it starts affecting that bend. So what I'm going to do is, with that object selected, I'm going to go to Object and Expand Appearance, and now it just makes that shape with the bend in it. So once I have that, I'm just going to put in my stripes. Group them together. And then I'm going to grab my line segment tool. And I'm just going to add some tassels down here at the bottom. Not too worried about getting them even right now. I'm just going to place all my tassels. I'm going to select them. And I'm going to go back to that Align panel. Remember, if you can't see it, just go to Window, Align. And I'm going to make sure that their vertical aligns are set up. And then I'm going to go to the Distribute Objects. And I'm going to hit Horizontal Distribute Center, and it will distribute them evenly spaced. Then I'm just going to select everything, make it one shape, pull it over here, send it behind that top part using Command or Control left bracket. And then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to make this one a little bit higher. And I'm going to double click to go into that isolation mode, and I'm just going to double click again so that way it goes into both groups. And I'm just going to get rid of that top square so that way it hides behind this a little easier. Then I'm going to do that trick with the hat that we did earlier, where I select this group, duplicate it, move it where I need it to be, collapse the entire shape. It's not going to get the tassels because those aren't shapes, they're lines, but that's fine. Not going for super realistic. So I'm just going to change it to black, go to Stylize and Feather, just put a slight feather on it, hit OK, make sure it's behind it, and I'm going to call that good, so that way these two strands don't blend into each other. And I'm going to do the same up here as well. And now I'm going to use my Blob Brush to give her some arms. I need to change the color so I can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, now I'm happy with it. I can just resize her to fit as needed. And then if I want to go in and add a background rather than creating things and then keep sending them backwards, I'm going to go to my layers panel. Again, if you can't find it, window, layers, and I'm going to hit that new button. It has the plus sign on it. It'll create a new layer. I'll just drag it down to the bottom. I'll hit this empty square that's next to layer 1 to lock it, so that way I can't affect anything on it. This will save me from creating a bunch of assets and having to keep sending them backwards behind all of my objects here. I can just go ahead and start drawing, and it automatically puts everything behind my snowman there. And now you know the basic tools and functions in Illustrator. You can make your snowman scene as detailed as you want, and then move on to practicing in more complicated projects. To save the Illustrator file, just go to File, Save, or Save As. To save it as a different file type, go to File, Export, Export As. If there is a specific asset that you want to export, just go ahead and select it, and then you will go to File, Export Selection. And that concludes our lesson in Illustrator Basics.